Hello, and welcome to Philosophy Briefs. I'm Eugenio Zaldivar. In this video, we'll consider one of the most famous propositions in the history of philosophy, Pascal's wager. This proposition was put forward in the mid-1600s as a response to problems with the traditional attempts to prove the existence of God. Pascal, as we will see, takes a very different approach from such famous philosophers as St. Anselm and St. Thomas Aquinas. So let's take a look at the argument. Pascal starts by first noting that we cannot know God. Indeed, he argues that we have not the slightest hope of understanding God because we have nothing in common with him. God is entirely different from us in every way that two things can be different. And without any commonality between us, we cannot know him. Of course, we can have lots of beliefs about God. We can have many opinions. But knowledge of God, or of his nature, is something that eludes us. Furthermore, because we cannot know anything about him, we have no way to prove that God exists. Now, one way to respond to this observation is to conclude that therefore the most rational course of action is to neither believe nor disbelieve in the existence of God. After all, if someone asks you to consider whether a thing exists, and you do not even understand what the person is talking about, let alone have no proof for its existence, then the most rational choice is to admit that you simply don't know whether the thing exists or not. This is, of course, the agnostic position. Pascal, however, does not accept the agnostic position. He notes that in the case of God, choosing to neither believe nor disbelieve is essentially the same as disbelieving. Anything other than affirmative faith basically collapses into the same position as that held by non-believers. This is especially so in Christianity, where the consequences of agnosticism and atheism are essentially the same. So, according to Pascal, there are really just two possibilities. You either believe in God or you don't believe in God. In addition to those two epistemic possibilities, you have two metaphysical possibilities. God exists or God doesn't exist. And, as you can see on the screen, we can combine these possibilities into a very simple matrix. Looking at the options presented in the matrix, we see four possible conclusions. If you do believe in God, and God exists, then the reward is very great. You gain an infinitely good reward. If you're a Christian, this is, of course, heaven. If you believe in God, but he does not exist, then nothing much happens. You will live your life faithfully, and at the end, when you die, there is nothing. If you don't believe in God, and God exists, then of course, the consequences are really horrible for you. If you're Christian, this would mean going to hell. Finally, if you don't believe in God, and God does not exist, then again, nothing much happens. You live your life faithlessly, and at the end, when you die, there is nothing. The lesson is fairly obvious. The only clearly positive outcome is to be found in the part of the matrix in which you believe in God. Believing in God either gets you an infinite reward, or, at worst, no negative consequences. Not believing in God gets you either infinite punishment, or, at best, no negative consequences. In short, the best case scenario for the atheist and the agnostic is no better than the worst case scenario for the theist. With a result like that, Pascal concludes that the only rational option is to believe in God. Naturally, there are some objections to this argument. We might start by noting that there are many religions. There are lots and lots and lots of different flavors of Christianity. And then there's many varieties of Islam, Judaism, Buddhism, and Hinduism, not to mention Shintoism, and the many varied Aboriginal and shamanistic religions, etc., etc., etc. There are so many religions that the likelihood of you finding the right one, the right set of religious practices and faith, that gets you that infinite reward is really, really low. Here, Pascal can respond by noting that even if it is true that the odds of you picking the right religion are really low, they are still better than zero. Indeed, if you don't make any choice, then you have absolutely no chance of getting the right religion. So while you might only have a 1 in a million chance of getting the right religion, and therefore the great reward, that's still better than a 0 chance. A second objection is that there's a stunning lack of evidence supporting religious belief in general, and support for any particular religious belief is even less evident. Given that, why bother? Why make the effort to live a faithful life when there is basically no concrete evidence to support that decision? In response, Pascal notes that we do things all of the time that are not supported by evidence. When you apply for a job, there's very little solid evidence that they're looking for someone just like you. When you try some new food, there's very little evidence that it's going to taste good. When you walk up to a stranger to say hello, there's very little evidence that this will lead to a good friendship. We do little more than act on faith in so many mundane circumstances, so why wouldn't we do so in this case too? Finally, we can object by noting that we simply can't choose to believe in things. We can say we ought to believe in God. We can see the rational argument for believing in God. Nevertheless, faith is not simply a matter of choice. It's not a switch that we can turn on and off merely by choice. Here we have perhaps the best objection of the three. Indeed, Pascal does not deny that you simply cannot choose to believe something. And yet, faith is a tricky thing. If you practice your faith, if you do the things that faithful people do, consistently and constantly, you will gradually come to think like them. Your faith will grow. If you immerse yourself in the activities of a particular mindset, you will eventually come to have that mindset. I can give you a very simple example. If you move to a city with a very strong loyalty to a particular sports team, you will very likely start to root for that team. If, for example, you move to Gainesville, Florida, which of course is very loyal to the University of Florida Gators, you will eventually root for the Gators. If you live there long enough, and you go to a few games, and you make small talk at work, etc., sooner or later you will find yourself being a fan of the Florida Gators. You may be a fan of other teams too, of course, but just being in an atmosphere in which everyone is a fan of the Gators has a kind of momentum, an impact on you that will make you a fan too. So Pascal's rejoinder is that gaining faith can work in very much the same way. If you go to church, if you surround yourself with faithful people, eventually you are very likely to develop your own faith. Finally, there's an extra benefit to having faith besides potentially winning the lottery. Pascal notes that believing in God will make you honest, grateful, humble, generous, sincere, etc. So it's reasonable to think that even if the chance that God exists is 0, choosing to believe in God is still better for you in terms of quality of life and especially in terms of quality of community. You may notice that Pascal is coming from a particularly Christian perspective. But also notice that a lot of these virtues I just mentioned, honesty, humility, generosity, and sincerity, etc., are virtues in just about every religion on the face of this planet. So we don't have to think of the wager as a purely Christian argument. In other words, besides the metaphysical benefits to having faith, there are worldly benefits to being faithful, and we ought not to overlook those. Philosophy Briefs is a production of Eugene Zaldivar. For more introductory videos, please visit our website at philosophybriefs.com.